I'm going pro in coaching. I used to think that like a competitive retirement was more or less giving up. And to be clear, this is definitely an end to a chapter that took up much of my life the last close to a decade. However, one thing is super clear, and I've come to realize it yet again, that I am competitive to my core. And when I do something, I want to give all of myself to it. So more or less, I've decided to double down on being the best parent, coach, gym owner, that I can possibly be. So I hope to serve my athletes through Zor Fitness and the people here at the gym better than I ever could while I was pursuing like my best version of my competitive self. Like I want nothing more than to see the people that I care deeply about thrive. I thought maybe it would be helpful if I shared a bit of my story. I finished collegiate wrestling in 2016 and walked into my first CrossFit gym, which was CrossFit 717. I think it was like right after the new year in 2017. I think that was like just my convenient way of doing it for a new billing cycle. And then also I wanted to do the CrossFit Open. And I remember getting advice from Fuller coaches after class about trying to string together bar muscle ups or trying to learn how to do butterfly pull-ups or even like kipping handstand push-ups. Because those are all things that while I had been doing some CrossFit training, just due to practical constraints like not having a pull-up bar I could kip on or not having a bar high enough to do bar muscle ups or simple things like that. I just like never did a lot of the basic skills, and I was obviously still new to things, so I was just learning it as a whole. And I was just trying to figure it out before I got into the Open. And some of my best memories of those early days were just like throwing down with my gym friends, like coming up with a workout after class and just throwing some extra volume in and throwing down with a bunch of people. And one of the things that stood out to me was just the amount of care that the coaching staff gave, right? Two coaches specifically, Jamie and Jeff, like they took extra time to celebrate wins with me and to like ask me like what was going on days where I like didn't feel great. And those are things that I still remember, where like I don't remember, coaching cues or tactics or specifics like that. I remember how they made me feel, which I think is an important thing for me to remember as a coach. Anyway, moving on, I got my L1 in 2017, started coaching classes at CrossFit 717 and doing other individualized programming basically on the side in late 2017. Not that I had an LLC or anything like that, but I basically created zorfitness.com some point in 2018. I think it was like April, May. I got the website up and running, and that was basically just like providing free content for people. And it's just, I've always been somebody who, like, as I learn things, I want to give back to people. And so that was more or less my platform to do that, right? I would just like post breakdowns of movements, to talk about my own training and how I'm organizing things. Yeah, and a lot of it was like me reworking and regurgitating other things I'm learning from other people and putting it in a way that like it was helpful for me. So really that was like, I did a little bit of coaching. I did a little bit of like content and things like that, all written for the most part. And then late 2018, I think I actually formed an LLC. And so that's when I started like being a little bit more strategic in how I was marketing myself and doing some of those sort of things. And then really from like, in terms of like my competitive career from like 2019 through 2022, that was sort of like this lull period where I was still improving. There's still a lot of things that I was cleaning up, learning about things, and obviously just continuing to get stronger and like build my skills and my tool set and things. But from 2019 through 2022, I kind of bounced around a bunch of different gyms. Some CrossFit gyms, one of the ones that I was working at in State College. I had Brian St. Andrews on before he owned CrossFit Nittany at the time. Now it's State College Strength Conditioning. And I worked there for a bit, went to a studio gym. There's another gym in the area that I went to. So I was just kind of bouncing around and then switched jobs at the time. Ended up training exclusively out of my garage through the winter of like 21 through 22. And let me tell you, waking up at 5 a.m. to like snatch up to a max in your garage when it's below freezing is a brutal way to wake up for sure. Like, I'm pretty sure I damaged my thumbs multiple times for trying to hook grip a frozen barbell. But during that time, I competed in several small local competitions, like, team partners type stuff. And then in October of 2022, with a 10-month-old son, I thought that was a great time to open up Lumber Capital Athletics. And that's where I'm sitting at right now. I'm sitting in my office as I record this at the gym. And the following year, I would say I finally got my head above water a bit. And I decided I could take training a little bit more seriously. And I began, I talked to my wife about it, and we decided that it was a good time for me to like start to travel and compete at a more serious level. So I'd say over the next 2 years, that was probably some of the most driven, purposeful training that I've done. And it also it was fairly fruitful in terms of like my competitive career, right? Like obviously I've never been a games athlete, but I did get to compete at some fairly high level regional type events. Metcon Rush, I've competed there a couple times, competed at Fitness Experience, Crash Crucible, last year at a semifinal at the Northern California Classic. Yeah, I mean, overall, across all the competitions I've done, obviously there's an array of experiences there, but I have a ton of great and a few not so great memories from all these competitions, right? Which I'm sure that all my competitors can relate to. I'll give you one good and one bad story, and I'll start with the bad one. Hopefully you guys can laugh at it now because I'm able to, but for a while it was something that caused me a lot of pain. Really no fault of my own. It was just, maybe carelessness, or maybe it was just handled poorly, but I'll lay it out for you and I'll let you enjoy it at my expense a bit. So I think this was maybe 2023. I was competing in a, fairly, it was a big for like a regional type event. When I say regional, I don't mean the CrossFit regionals. I mean a demographic regional type event where it draws people from around, a couple of states perhaps, right? But it's not going to have the draw of like a huge, big name competition. Anyway, at this competition, which doesn't exist anymore actually, or got rebranded essentially, I wasn't sure exactly where I was at when the whole competition wrapped up. There's a couple games athletes there. There's people who I knew beat me in multiple events. So I wasn't really sure exactly how the points were going to shake out. So I was just kind of hanging around. I wasn't sure if I should leave because I wasn't completely sure if I was on the podium or not. And then they announced me on third. So obviously I was pretty stoked about that. Got up there. Media team takes all the photos. And we're looking around and we're like, the guy who beat me in, I think, 3 out of the 4 workouts isn't even on the podium. I was like, where is he at? And realized that I actually went up and talked to the organizer. I was like, hey, he's supposed to be on here. I was like, you guys got your points wrong. So about 10 minutes later, they come out to us and say, hey, guys, we screwed up. Actually, I don't even think they said they screwed up. I just think they said, this is wrong. And they were like, hey, can we just swap out all of the prizes? So basically, we had to swap out, and the guy, and that was actually the guy who won. And then I got kicked off the podium. So all of the media stuff was kind of useless at that point. And I'm not sure actually what they did, if they posted the photos or not. But anyway, I essentially got kicked off the podium after being called out to be up there and everything. So fast forward, I think it was roughly 2 months. This was in the wintertime that I went to a very big name competition that's super well known. And again, had a couple games athletes there, pretty solid roster. And generally, like, I try not to leaderboard much when I'm in competitions because I'm focused on doing what I can and executing to the best of my ability. And only if it's like relevant for, like, you have to place in front of this person or something, and I have someone relaying me that information so I don't have to worry about it myself. So at the end of it, they announce us and we're up there, and I found out that I got third. And we're up there once again, take all the media outlets, they're grabbing photos and they hand out all the prizes. I get my prize money, fly home, and then 2 days later I get a call that says, hey, due to a scoring error, you're not on the podium anymore. And we're not going to track you down for your prize money, but essentially, like, you're not on the podium. So basically back-to-back competitions within less than a 3-month period, I was on the podium and publicized as being there, and then had that stripped away. So I'm laughing at it now, like I'm come to terms with it, but it was something that was like incredibly frustrating, and like something that was just like, mind-boggling that happens not once but twice. So hopefully you guys can enjoy that. that was obviously the bad. Maybe it was the ugly. The other side of it is like what's like my most fond memory, or the one that's like most burnt into my mind in like a positive sense. Crash Crucible was, one of the competitions that I knew was like a big one that I'd like to go to before I kind of put a close on my career as a CrossFitter. And I went there, I guess that was last fall, and I was seated pretty poorly because I didn't do great in the all-in qualifier, but I did get through, which I never do as great in those anyway, so it was kind of fine. It is what it is. But my goal was to get into the live streamed events, which I think was the last 3 generally for most of the workouts, as quickly as possible. So basically, so people back home can actually see me compete, because obviously, like, just the family went with me. And thankfully, I was able to climb up the last, I think there were 7 scored events, but I got myself in a position for the last day where I was in the final heat, and there's only like 6 in a heat, so it was me and the top guys. And we were doing a run burpee over the yoke deadlift at like 355, like ascending rep scheme type workout. So like obviously like everything exciting is going on inside with like the yokes and the deadlift bars, and then you run outside and you run around Crash, and it's pretty quiet. Like Crash is already kind of a different spectator event in the sense that like the number of people that are there are a lot less, because it's just basically an elite field and then a masters field. So the total number of people in the building, and obviously it's not like a huge venue like a lot of places. It's a gym. So it's just like a smaller, much more intimate feel. And so when you go outside, it's just almost dead quiet. Like, you're just outside running around a building. And that was a workout. It was like 22-ish. No, well, I think that was like testing. I think it was actually more like, I think we were sub 20. Anyway, it was a nice, long, grindy workout. And I remember I was going out for my last run, which you've just done a big set of deadlifts, so it's like the most excruciating part. And you're getting out there, you're trying to get back up to speed. And again, it's completely quiet. And I remember running around the building, and I kind of knew my wife and my 2 kids were outside. My wife is literally there with my 3 or 4 month old son, and my other son would be, he would have been 3 at the time, and he just is there and he yells, "Go Daddy!" And that was, that's a memory that I won't ever forget. It was like one of those things where I really needed it in the workout at that time, and for me at that time, I obviously use it to do my best in terms of like trying to get to my best performance in the workout. But looking back on it, it's just like that's like a good representation of the type of support I had throughout my CrossFit career, and it's something that I am extremely grateful for. So, yeah, that's something I'll remember forever. Yeah, I mean, I've gotten asked from a few people like, "Why are you done competing?" I think, simply put, with anything, right? Anything you put into your life, right? The juice has to be worth the squeeze. So, the last 3 years, I would say, I really squeezed, so to speak, every ounce that I could, right? I squeezed that lemon or that orange pretty dang hard. I'm always someone who's trained hard. I'm actually looking over on my wall here. I have a framed bunch of like old scrap paper workouts. They were all in a drawer somewhere, and my mom made a collage out of them several years ago, and it's hanging up in my office here. But one of them, which I think is the oldest one that I found on there, it's like on this green piece of like scratch paper essentially, and it's just like every day. So it's like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then it has push-ups and sit-ups, and it's like in cursive writing, which means that it would have been like elementary school, and it's just like filled out, right? So it's like got all these reps on it without like missing a day. There's like 20, maybe 25 lines, and they're all filled in. So like I've always been just like, for whatever reason, I've just kind of always been predisposed to like working hard. I don't know what that is exactly, but like working hard has never been like a struggle for me. I really kind of leaned into that work ethic the last couple of years, and owning a gym meant that I can organize my time however I want, right? So I can carve out time to train every single day. And oftentimes I would do that twice a day, right? So if I'm trying to do the best I can, double days, a good chunk of my training days is like, how I'm going to get there. So what that really meant for me was like, I'm cramming program design, I'm cramming any of like my business activities that I need to get done, and like important business development type things. I'm just pushing that to other areas of my day to try to get it off my training times, right? Like these are my ideal training slots. I'm putting in all that stuff around there. And it ends up just kind of consuming everything, and like me working throughout the weekends, being behind too often on program design in terms of like I'm feeling stressed because I need to get it done. Not that I didn't get it done, because I don't do that. I think more than anything, it's just like that was like me like acknowledging that like, okay, I got to dial in the details. And like if I'm doing double days and I'm putting off certain business activities for me to do that, then it's like this has to be worth it to me. So like 2024, I started with Stacy, who's my co-owner, and she was basically doing my nutrition coaching and guidance there. And basically that just meant me fueling enough where I often felt like I didn't want to eat, or, you know, if I just put it bluntly, I think a lot of times I ate until I wanted to puke. But the good news is, like, the things that I was tracking, you know, that my strength metrics in particular were moving in the right direction. And that's like what I hired her to do. Also, in like the last year of my competitive career, I hired Kyle Ruth, who's obviously been on the show quite a bit. He coached me. And during that last year, including some like movement sessions, so these weren't all intensive sessions by any means, but we logged about 500 workouts from when we started using CoachRx, which would have been like January, through the end of 2025. I wrote a little quote, and I'll just read it. In a world of jaded, copy and paste, happy, quote unquote, fitness coaches, Kyle was refreshing. What I learned from Kyle is also my unsolicited advice to others seeking coaching. It is not enough to find someone who knows what you need. You need to find someone who believes in you. So like, as someone who I hope understands program design and coaching and those sorts of things well, one of the things that I just underestimated would, in terms of value with coaching, you know, for myself as an athlete versus, you know, providing it to other people, how much value there was in just someone else there to be a support to you, right? Just someone else that's like invested in your success and who wants the best for you and can help you be a little bit more objective, which I think have all been things I've talked about before, but it was just a little bit different for me to experience it kind of firsthand. Obviously, I'm in debt to the people that have helped me along the way. And I think in 2026, to be clear, I am still enjoying training a lot. I'm still finding marginal improvements, but there are no more sweeping gains to be made, so to speak, right? Like I'm going after marginal improvements. And that's going to be the way it is, right? I'm not going to have like all of a sudden add 10% to my lifts. It's just not going to happen, right? Without injecting myself with something, which I made that decision not to do years ago. Like without doing that, it's a process of refinement and going after tiny bits of a percentage, right? And there's still a lot of value in that. I was still enjoying it, but I also am understanding and not naive to the fact that you can only go so far into age and into your training career before things start to sputter out. You know, that was part of it, right? I'll be lying if that wasn't part of it. But I think more importantly, when I started, it was just Brooke, my wife, and I. And now we are a party of four, so to speak, right? And dragging around a 4-year-old and 1-year-old on a plane to go watch daddy, you know, pay to compete somewhere, right? I'm not getting paid to do this. You know, I've won very little, relatively speaking, prize money throughout my competitive career. That just doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? Like, I would rather take that money and have us go on a family trip over the summer. That is like, you know, go spend a week in somewhere sunny. Or take that money and go support athletes who are competing at a competition, right? And try to get a couple athletes that I have stacked up somewhere, or go to, you know, athletes competing at semifinals or hopefully the games, things like that. Maybe this is a last point here, but one of my main motivators to compete has always been the ability to relate to and to serve my athletes better as a coach. And I for sure believe that my competitive experiences have and will continue to. They're not going to go away. I think they've resulted in me having a better understanding and deeper connection to my athletes. Like if I hadn't gone through my competitive career and strive for my best and gone through the process of what it looks like to prepare for an event that I care about very deeply, that has something at stake, if I don't go through that process, it's very hard for me to relate to athletes who do go through that process. And I still have all of those experiences that I can draw from as I go throughout the rest of my life and my coaching career. And those things are going to be something that I can continue to leverage indefinitely. I will say that there have been times over the years where I've competed at the same competitions as one or several of my athletes who are also competing there. And if there's ever been times where I've done anything less than an excellent job as a coach, those are the sorts of things that have kind of eaten me up as I think back on it. And not that I'm ever going to be perfect as a coach, but knowing that I could have done a better job if I wasn't currently competing, those are the things that you think about. The fitness movement is sponsored by Coach RX. This fall, I knew that the writing was on the wall, so to speak, for my CrossFit career, and I started putting more time back into the business, especially updating some archaic systems. Like, for example, our billing software was a mess, and frankly, using spreadsheets to program was just becoming more and more cumbersome. So I moved a handful of my reliable long-term clients that have been working with me for a long time to software platforms. So I would say there's technical reasons why I chose that software and I've stuck with it, but there's also a non-technical reason. Other companies don't understand the type of training that I write as a coach of CrossFit athletes, and I will be actively swimming upstream against their desires of how I like to write training. Now compare that to Coach RX, that's basically been birthed out of OPEX, which is, and has been since the beginning, a thought leader, so to speak, in writing mixed modal training and just understanding the demands of a CrossFit coach. So if you're someone who's either coming from spreadsheets and looking to be more professional in the product you deliver, like I was, or if you're someone who's on a different software and looking to get into something that's maybe a little bit more affordable, do what I did. Move a few athletes over on a trial basis, and if you like it, go all in. Check out the link in the show notes for a 14-day free trial. I would say lastly, I've gotten asked, like, what are you doing next? And one thing, and this is something that I preach all the time as a gym owner, is that you never get to be done with fitness. You never just get to check off that box and be like, all right, well, I'm fit now, I get to move on, or I'm not competitive, so I'm not going to work out or something. Like, this is still something that I care about deeply. It's still something that I'm going to use to challenge myself. And thankfully, I still really love doing CrossFit, and I plan to continue to do training and have a bunch of like non-competitive goals. I don't have super concrete goals just yet. I think a little bit more space will be productive for me to think of that, but I'll probably start tracking that and like posting on my workout log, the Instagram account, just start to do that again. Also just like use those opportunities, like my own training to leverage learnings that I can use for my athletes, because that was what it was all about originally anyway. I was competing. Yes, I was doing it to the best of my ability, but it was also a big part of that was always the knowledge that I could pass on what I'm learning to other people, because that's something that I've always found value in. I've said this before, both my parents were teachers. I was a teacher for the first 2 years of my career, and then I decided just to redirect it into coaching rather than, a formal education setting. And that hasn't gone away. Like I want to help people that I care about deeply thrive. And if I'm learning and curious about things, it sparks ideas for me. It's not uncommon for me to be going through my own training or be taking a road trip or something where like my hands are busy, my mind is idle, where I'm thinking about my athletes' training and what they need to do, how I can help them out, how we can help them progress. I like thrive on those things. So yeah, I mean, there have definitely been things that I've neglected or maybe selected to ignore as an athlete that I also want to get right physically. I tore my labrum prepping for phys experience a couple years ago. I still have some compensations with that. Like basically my one scap likes to elevate, so just like working on getting that to just kind of repatterning that a bit. I had a hip flexor injury that's been sticking with me and it's improving a bit, but again, when you have so many priorities, it's hard to find space to take care of all the little odds and ends, especially someone who's not a professional athlete. And then also I just like want to make sure that I like maintain certain things, right? Which is not super sexy, but it's something that I want to make sure I'm doing, right? Like I want to be able to run. And I actually talked about this with Kyle as we were kind of evaluating where I want to go with and like what goals I have. It was like, if I can go out the door and go for a run and I feel good, again, relatively speaking, I feel good running, that's a good barometer that my fitness is where it should be. And if I don't feel good running, that I don't feel athletic and I don't feel fit. And again, that is super subjective, but that's something that I want to prioritize in the upcoming months, but like honestly, just like my entire life. Like I want to be a lifelong runner, right? And I don't have to be doing in marathons or anything like that. And I don't plan on doing a whole lot of races. but I do want to be able to maintain those qualities. And honestly, I want to get into our classes as much as I possibly can, because that's something that like when you're training, you have to be preparing for your next competition. And you have to be very selective, especially as you're getting higher in training age. You have to be very selective about where you're putting your energy, right? So I'm not just going to jump into a random class and outstrip my recovery abilities to get extra volume of, shuttle runs and burpee pull-ups, because at a certain extent, like, that's not helpful. And because I pushed that off for a while, in the last several weeks, I've been, I haven't made this transition very long ago, but I've been really enjoying that, and something that I want to do more of. So I think that's just a matter of like me creating a bit of space. And the good thing is, like I said, I'm still enjoying doing CrossFit. And honestly, my body is holding out pretty well. Like I mentioned those few things, but it's not like a lot. And overall, day to day, when I wake up in the morning, it's not like I'm limping around. Like I feel good, which is actually a much better place, like body care wise, and just like health, hormonal status as a whole, than when I got out of college wrestling. I was messed up when I got done with college wrestling, for a multitude of reasons. Probably the main one was because it's college wrestling. But yeah, I mean, I guess all of that's to say, like, in some ways I'm excited, which I think is good. There's like opportunity. And I think also, like, I'm creating space for myself, and I'm aiming to be targeted in how I fill up my time. So I'm going to be striving to be the best husband and father I can be. And I think for me, everybody's got things that challenge them to make that happen. For me, I think it just means saying no to certain work things that I could be doing, because that's what eats at me is like, if you're an athlete, it's like, okay, well, I should be recovering right now. I should be doing this. It's very much the same thing as a business owner, where it's like, if you do it correctly, so to speak, that it would consume 24 hours of your day, right? Like you optimize everything to get as good as you possibly can at that one thing, which obviously could be like athlete mode. It could be business development, right? And so for me, it's just important that I have made decisions ahead of time as to where I'm allocating my resources and when I'm going to say no to certain things. It's like, okay, I could be checking this lead right now. It's 8 p.m. and my kids are getting ready for bed. I'm going to put my phone away. I'm going to go be with the family. So I think it's being very honest with myself about how I'm allocating my time and protecting certain things when I could let work take over. And again, I'm not going to be perfect on that, because I haven't been already up to this point, but putting systems in place to make sure, and I've actually taken some big steps this year already to make some changes. And that's something that I will continue to refine and work on, is how to be a better parent in particular. Yeah. And then I would say business development, like I'm my own boss, which means I get to structure my time pretty much however I want, right? Obviously there's certain things that, like, classes I coach or meetings that I have, like, but again, at the end of the day, I could like choose someone to, pick a coach and pay him to cover that class, or to move a call, or, whatever. Like I'm more or less completely in charge of my schedule. So it's really easy, and has been really easy, especially when I was competing, to let certain like non-urgent important tasks, those are the things that it's just the easiest to get squeezed out if you aren't in like a positive way, like rigidly scheduled into, like, if you don't rigidly schedule those into your calendar, it's probably going to get pushed out. So making sure that I do that. And then lastly, I would say I want to serve my people better, right? And that starts off with like staff stuff, right? Because like they're the ones that are like pushing the whole thing forward, right? So the people here at the gym, Lumber Capital Athletics, my coaches with Zor Fitness, Chris and Tay, those are the people that I want to serve the best I can. But at the end of the day, I think it comes back to the people who have entrusted me with their fitness. I'm thankful for each one of those people, each one of my athletes, whether they're people at the gym or people that I'm coaching one-on-one, right? I will say I'm proud of the service that I've provided my clientele over the last several years. And there will always be areas that I can improve upon, and I plan to do that. Thanks for listening. Stay the course.